So now that we learned how a parent communicates data to the child component, let's see if we can go the other way. So for example, here I want it to function so that if I click follow for Cyclops, I want the console to say following Cyclops or unfollowed Cyclops. But that would mean that the object that represents Cyclops, which currently has the picture, the name, and the Twitter properties, I want that object to have a new property called isFollowing, and I want that to be set to either true or false, depending on the button click. So we have to add a new property. However, I don't want that done in the component. I want that done in the parent. So we need some way to communicate from the child to the parent, and this is where the let's see here, the emitting a value with an event comes in. So on button click, we can have an emit, where we can emit some kind of label, and this ties into the very first video that I made, where we were creating custom events with some custom label, and this is the same kind of thing. So we can emit some kind of event and pass in some kind of value and listen for it on the other end and do something with that when that event happens. So let's copy this kind of thing here, and we're going to use, instead of an @click, we're going to use something else, because I did notice if I click on one of these buttons, it tries to do a GET request, and if you look why that is, it's because this button is of type submit within a form. So I mean, you could solve that by maybe getting rid of the type submit and getting rid of the form, and then maybe putting an @click event handler here. But we already know how to use the @click, so we're going to use something different this time. We're going to keep everything as is, and we're going to listen for a submit. And just like how before we had @click.prevent, we can have the .prevent as well after the submit. So we can say .prevent equals quotes, and this is where we're going to copy this kind of thing here. And we're going to change the insides of that in a second. So, all right, so the question is what kind of labels we want to fire off. So maybe we'll just say, follow button clicked. And then what kind of value do we want to press? Do we want to pass? So maybe just for now, we'll just hard code a value of true, and then we'll experiment with that later on. And so now that we have set a way for the child to emit a custom event to the parent, the question is, how do we listen for that on the parent side? The answer is in the HTML on that component, you say and it's not @click, it's whatever you emitted. So if I copy that and say @follow button clicked equals, and some kind of method that we're going to call. So let's call it follow, which is a function we have yet to define in our parent. So in our methods, after add, let's say follow. And for now, let's just see if it works. Alert, follow button clicked. Let's just see if that works. Save, add hero, click, and it does. So let's see now with what happens with these parameters. We did pass in that true value. So the question is, how do we access that? Let's see here in the documentation. Here it's saying, okay, in the parent, it has some kind of function and then some kind of parameter. So that parameter, I assume, is going to contain this, whatever is in the second argument here. So let's just see if that works. So since this is the second argument, I anticipate this to be passed inside here. So we'll just call it maybe state, and then let's alert, or maybe just alert our state just to see if the word true comes through. Maybe console log is better. Okay, so let's say save, add hero, click, true. That means if I add false, it'll be false. All right. Let's see, add hero and false. Great. So what I want to do, I want to add a new property called isFollowing to the hero. So I need some way to pass both the hero and the state. So one way to do that, if you just want to pass one thing, and it's the standard way nowadays to pass in arguments is just to use an object, right? So we'll pass in the state, an object with a key of state value of false for now. We're going to change that in a second. And to pass in the hero, we'll say hero is this current superhero, which we already have access to. Let's see if that works. So here we're getting an object which we can destructure into hero and state, right? So that's destructuring objects, just as a reminder. Object destructuring. So if you have an object that contains, the state and the hero, you can say something like this within the function. So let's say if we console log that, save, add hero, let's see what happens. So I get the hero and I get the state. So perfect. So now I want to say like this hero dot is following, which immediately creates a new property, equals the state. So can I do that? Let's see. Hero dot is following equals the state. Let's see what happens. Save, and let me go to my debug mode and say add hero, which currently is this. So if I click on follow, I anticipate that a new property called isFollowing should appear. Let's see. And it doesn't. But an event did fire, follow button click, but nothing happened with that property. Oh, now it says it. So I had to click away from it and then it shows. That doesn't make sense. And so when I researched into that, it's because what's happening is that view, when you initially have some kind of property key value object and you change that value, it'll be reactive because you already set that beforehand. But if as soon as you say that object dot b, which you're adding a new property to that object, that dot b is not reactive. And so the solution to that is to let's see here, where was that solution here? Oh yeah, so it's to use view.set, or another way is this $set, where you're saying for this object, add a new property called isFollowing, set it to true, for example. So I'm going to copy that, and here, instead of just saying it like that, I'm going to say this current hero, I want a new property called isFollowing, and I want it to be set to whatever was passed in, true or false. Let's see what happens now. So save that, go to my debug, refresh, add, there it is. Let's see what happens now. Click, haha. So it's working, so it's immediate and it's reactive. Now I just have to figure out the logic. So I think what we want is we don't want to pass in the state to be false. We want to pass in the opposite of superhero.isFollowing, right? So at first, superhero.isFollowing does not exist, which would be undefined. that would evaluate as undefined, but again, undefined will evaluate as false. But if we want to pass in the opposite value, which is true, that means the first time around when we click the button, that means the state is following is true, which we want. So let's see what happens now. Hero, there it is. Click is following is true, right? Which is true. And then if we click it again, let's see if it, oh, it doesn't go. It's still true. Let's see. We're almost there. We're almost there. So one other thing before we figure that out, we also want the button itself, this one here, to change accordingly to depending on the state of his following. So maybe we could put in a mustache template and use a ternary operator where if this current superhero is following is equal to true, if it is, then we'll output something. If not, we'll output some other thing, right? So if it's true, then that means the button changes from plus follow to maybe minus unfollow. And then if it's false, that means we haven't followed them yet. That means the button should say follow. And again, we don't need this equals true. That's implied. So let's see what happens here. Add hero. There we go. Oh, now it's working. That's interesting. It wasn't working before. Let's go back to the debug mode. Add hero. Let's just take a look at that. Right, click it again. Oh, now it's working. Okay, great. So that is, in a nutshell, how child components emit events to the parent.